Hello friends, this is Growl. The War Within Alpha is finally upon us. I was lucky enough to get early access to check out some of the changes, and I'm bringing you my first impressions and review of how Restoration Druid is looking in the coming expansion. Keep in mind we're still really early, so any talks about how weak or strong something will be doesn't hold a lot of water. I'm mainly trying to cover the levels of fun and depth that the gameplay is looking like it's going to provide. Druid got a lot new already in the build that was posted, including a reworked class tree, new talents, and 2 complete hero talent builds. Resto Druid right now seems like it's staying pretty true to what we'd expect Druid to be, but keep in mind it still has enough interesting twists and gameplay changes. It's not nearly the same as it was in Dragonflight, so I think it'll still be fun on release. As always, Druid's a really well-rounded healer in 5-mans. It has lots of good options for healing, especially group healing. It has very solid utility and a nearly invaluable group buff in Mark of the Wild. First, let's talk about the hero tree. The setup is sort of choosing your playstyle, buffing either your treants or buffing your heal over time effects. You'll notice that the hero trees aren't really that game-breaking. They're basically loaded with passives that just buff your current abilities and don't really change the way that you use them. In my opinion, they're some of the least gameplay-changing hero trees among all the healers. That being said, I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, Druid is a pretty complex class as it is. There's a ton of different hots to worry about. In Raid, I think it's one of the more difficult healers that requires really precise timing and ramping. And in Mythic Plus, you have tons of shape-shifting and utility stuff to worry about. So I don't necessarily think they needed hero talents to complicate things. So I like their decision to just use them to augment 2 different styles of play. I know most players are just going to choose like whatever tree numerically just gives the most healing. Gonna Google a guide and just click the nodes that people tell them to click, but I do like that it offers you a choice of sticking with whatever style you prefer. The end of Dragonflight sort of posed an annoying situation for Druid, given that they were really powerful, but it also relied on that tier set bonus with Grove Guardians, so strong direct healing, only using Grove Guardians and Regrowth instead of the classic like stacking heal over time effects that Druids are used to. And even if that ends up staying the meta of using trees, I think the Druid like heal over time playstyle, if you don't want to play the normal way, will be way more viable. The real big changes that Druid got is in the class tree. The Druid's tree has been completely shuffled around. It now has like 3 distinct lines. You have the melee playstyle on the left, you have caster range DPS on the right, and then you sort of have like the healer all around utility stuff in the middle. A lot of the weak nodes that you would feel bad about taking have been removed or updated or buffed. So for instance, getting things like Skull Bash, the melee kick for dungeons, is way more obtainable in a resto build. The downside that comes with choice though is that there's going to be powerful nodes that you simply can't take, specifically stuff that you used to be able to take that you now can't. Now that there's competitive options in all sides of the tree, you may have to sacrifice things that you wanted, like incapacitating roar or defensive options, or maybe Heart of the Wild. My biggest worry currently right now with the tree, in Dragonflight there was a ton of really high damage sort of one-shot stuff, like really heavy hitting bosses that sort of force Druids to take defensive talents, and there's so many good defensive nodes in here, so I worry that the high keys are going to force us to kind of take some of these left nodes and leave some of the more fun options unpicked, but that's a high Mythic Plus meta problem. Keep in mind that won't have an effect on tons of people just looking to heal dungeons and play with their buds. Honestly, my only real complaint with the tree right now is that the AoE Sunfire, if you want that, it takes 3 whole points to obtain. It's such a powerful damage option, even if you're mostly a defensive Druid, still throwing that AoE Sunfire on a pack of mobs does a lot of damage and it's really, really effective. However, you know, again, if you aren't needing to use that, or maybe you're raiding, it might feel nice to be able to save those 3 points and use them on something else. The Spec Tree, the Resto Tree, is pretty much unchanged. However, there's a few things missing and a few new nodes that I think are important to highlight. The big one is that Adaptive Swarm is gone. Adaptive Swarm is a really powerful spell, don't get me wrong, but I'll just be honest with you, I felt the gameplay of it was really uninteresting, and I'm so happy to see it's gone. It essentially devolved into you just use it on cooldown or else you're losing a lot of output, which often just means that you download a weak aura, it just plays a noise or tells you when to use it. A lot of these weak auras even told you the target that you're supposed to use it on, so I'm really glad to see that gone. I think that it helps with the bloat of the class. Another thing that's gone is Moonkin form. It's just not even in the class tree anymore. I kind of like it because previously you would be like, well, do I Moonkin weave or do I cat weave? But now it's more of like a fluid experience. It's just like, well, you know, do I want melee damage? Do I want range damage? Do I want both? Do I want neither? It's not necessarily a one or the other choice, although it may come down to that sometimes. Although I'll definitely be able to miss like being able to convoke in Moonkin form to get, you know, a full moon and starfall and all that. But speaking of fluid, one of my favorite new additions to the tree is called Fluid Form. This is a new class talent that allows you to cast Rake or Shred in human form. This means that you don't have to spend that extra global shifting into cat form. You can just easily sneak in one or two spells before going back into human form to heal. This combines also very well with some new Spec Tree talents that I want to talk about here as well. Call of the Elder Druid and Dream of Cenarius. Call of the Elder Druid gives Heart of the Wild once per minute whenever you switch forms into combat forms. Not only is this going to buff your damage, obviously, but then now it's going to synergize with the third talent, which when I explain it, it'll all come together. Dream of Cenarius converts all of your damage with Shred, Swipe, Wrath, and Starfire into healing. So now all three of these means that you're just going to be shape-shifting and cat-weaving so much more in Mythic Plus, and it's really going to feel so much more fun. It's going to feel fluid and effective. A lot of times it's hard because you don't want to go into cat form because let's say things feel safe, you press cat form, you know, you press Rake one time, and then, oh no, your team steps in something stupid, and now it feels like, why did I just switch into cat form and do nothing? Now it doesn't even take that global to switch into cat form. You can just immediately go in and out. It feels really, really good. I was enjoying playing with it. Keep in mind that during like heavy AoE damage, I tried to just pop Heart of the Wild and just spam Swipe and Shred, but that wasn't enough. I did have to shift out of form in order to do bigger healing. Obviously, we don't know the final tuning, but it was mainly just helping top people up if they were taking some minor avoidable damage. Let's say a pull that only does tank damage, it helps keep the tank topped, but it's not necessarily like, you know, a major healing cooldown that's doing tons and tons of healing. It's really a great supplement to Heart of the Wild. You know those times when you pop Heart of the Wild and then your idiot DPS just stands in a puddle, takes 90% of their health, and it's like, well, you feel like you should top them, but are they really in danger? Now they'll just passively get healed up, assuming that you have that talented, so you can just sort of sit in Heart of the Wild. It just makes it way more effective. I've been talking a lot about DPS, but let me be clear that it sort of works both ways when I talk about the talents being improved. If you're more defensive minded, let's say you're someone that doesn't prefer to do as much damage, you know, you feel like your teammates are all monkeys, you pug a lot, you just want to keep your team alive. You also have a lot of really strong options that you're putting your points into that any DPS minded player or, you know, monkey healer won't have available to them. So one new talent is Thriving Vegetation. I would consider this sort of a raid talent. It boosts your rejuvenation, it gives it a direct heal, and then it also makes it last a lot longer. But this combining with all the defensive talents and some of the other bonuses in your class tree, meaning that if you decide to skip out on DPS and you're mostly just creating a healing build, you're gonna have way bigger levels of survivability and boosted healing compared to like a DPS minded healer. So overall, I think it's just a big win for druids. You know, again, I'm an aggressive sort of Mythic Plus push damage healers, but there are a lot of benefits for defensive minded healers as well. Honestly, the biggest negative reaction I see, as I mentioned earlier, is just because there's so many good nodes that you won't be able to take. You know, it can feel bad, especially stuff that you used to have previously, stuff like Incapacitating Roar that you might not be able to take, but I think it's just a byproduct of, you know, now you have a lot of options at your disposal, but I can see why that might frustrate people. Another talent change is, or I want to mention, is the return of Prosperity. Swiftmen getting 2 charges. This was a talent that I really loved in BFA. I didn't like it at first, but it super grew on me by the end of the expansion. I'm really happy to see it return, mainly because it just gives you a little bit of on-demand healing. It makes Druid feel like more of a traditional healer and less with HOTS. It also lets you really benefit from the Soul of the Forest talent if you're using it well. That being said, it feels a little weird with the changes to Swiftmen now that it requires having like specific heal over time on that person. Part of the flexibility of Prosperity in BFA was that you can use Prosperity with your Swiftmen into regrowth, even if someone had no HOTS on them. Let's say someone, again, in a pug takes an unexpected burst of damage. They might not have any HOTS on them already. You just Swiftmen, regrowth, and then it does a significant amount of healing. And you sort of can't do that anymore, and it requires 1 extra global. I do think the change to Swiftmen back in Shadowlands does take away a little bit of the fun, but I'm glad still to see it return. But you might notice that it's in the area that previously was occupied by Flourish. So now where is Flourish? And unfortunately for most Druids, you'll find it back as a choice node with Photosynthesis. This is something that I think might upset a lot of Druids, especially those who have gotten used to playing with both of the talents in Dragonflight. Specifically, Flourish got nerfed a lot in Dragonflight because it was so easy to get to, and you could combine it with other talents like Photosynthesis that made it really strong. They had to nerf it pretty heavily. It's like definitely a shell of what it once was. In my opinion, I think I'd like to see a really big buff to Flourish. I want to see it return to former glory as like a strong burst healing cooldown instead of just kind of like a whatever press it because I have it button. I really think it should be strong on demand, and then you sort of have that option of, well, do I want a big strong cooldown on Flourish, or do I want that constant flow of healing that Photosynthesis gives me? Keep in mind though, again, we're very early in the alpha. I think this one hopefully is still being cooked up. Besides that, I had a chance to heal a few dungeons as Druid in the alpha. They don't have Mythic Plus difficulty yet. Obviously, we're very early, but I do want to comment a little bit on how it felt to play, and I really enjoyed it. It felt very true to Druid. At the same time, the new cat weaving and shapeshifting talents felt amazing. Obviously, if you're not using those, it's going to feel, you know, a lot more classical, but I definitely went all in right away with all the different damage options. Healing wise, it's like pretty much what you'd come to expect with Druid. You know, you have your really big heal over time effects, stuff like Life Bloom, Efflorescence, Cenarian Ward, and then when people are in danger, you throw out your wild growths and your regrowths. You know, pretty classic, same stuff. You're not going to have any crazy new utility. All that's mostly the same. But honestly, Druid utility is like, it's never been in short supply anyway. I don't really think that's a bad thing. Overall, I was really happy. I enjoyed my time playing Druid in the alpha. I'd be pretty optimistic if I was Druid coming into the new expansion. And that's basically my overall overview and first impressions on the class after checking out the tree and playing it in some dungeons. So I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you. I hope to cover tons more of this content, specifically about healers going into the new War Within expansion. If there's stuff that I missed, things that you wanted me to talk about, or things that you hope that I talk about in the future, I'd love you guys to throw them in the comments. I'm going to try and nail out some videos as stuff keeps getting released and posted, and I do hope to keep the mage videos up soon as well, but it's going to be a little tough juggling everything. But thank you so much for watching and following, and happy keying, friends.